guys, in today's video, we're going to talk about how to overcome a container objection. Now, this is when a prospect will tell you they are just looking to get a pod service. Before we jump into how to overcome this objection, it's really important to understand the disadvantages of working with a pod or a container. First, pods are a complete service altogether than a full service moving company. And a lot of these prospects do not understand that there are weight rules when you get a pod. An example of a weight rule when you get a pod as of August 2023 on a 16-foot container that holds 835 cubic feet is you would have 4,200 pounds limit. That means you can hold 4,200 pounds on that 16-foot container. That would give you about a 1-to-5 ratio, when normally you want to be around a 1-to-7 cubic foot to pound ratio. The 1-to-7 ratio is much safer when you're getting an estimate, as if you completely stack that pod full, there is a high probability that that prospect would go overweight if they're running a 1-to-5 pound ratio. Now, it's also really important to understand if you don't perfectly pack this pod floor to ceiling high with the weight distribution absolutely perfect, a lot of these items can shift, bounce around, and get damaged. Now, most prospects don't understand this as they're not movers. Now, a prospect can buy insurance on a pod, but would they ever see the money with the insurance? That's a whole nother story altogether. You know, typically insurance costs a little bit more working with a pod than a quality mover. And that's because the risk is a little bit lower working with actual professional movers that do this every day. An example of getting insurance where it really doesn't really cover something would also be, yes, you can buy insurance on FedEx for any package. But if it's not packed in a very particular way or packed by the company, a lot of times those insurances will not cover you. I personally, when I was about 18 years old, went through that experience myself. I paid for insurance to ship a computer across the country. I packed it. I put $5,000 insurance. The computer showed up across the country completely damaged, and they didn't cover it. And why? I didn't read the fine print and have them pack this because that was one of their requirements. It's also important that you understand and make them understand that they're going to be loading everything themselves. Believe it or not, a lot of times it can be the same price to work with a professional mover as it can to be, to get a pod service when all options are on the table. If you're just looking at the front number, a lot of times you're going to get beat out by a container, by a pod. But when you think about actually everything as a whole, working with a professional mover can get cheaper. And I'm going to tell you why. Some of the examples are damaged goods will cost them. If you've never loaded a truck before, if the prospect's never loaded a truck, chances are it's going to be loaded improperly. Becoming a good loader takes many, many, many years to become this. Even as someone who's hired a lot of stackers, the first year or two, they weren't really good. It wasn't until they had 4 or 5 years under their belt that a stacker really knew how to load that truck without a problem. They would always have to work with one of the higher, more experienced stackers and have their stuff checked. And even me, when I would walk into the warehouse, I would see that a stacker of 3 or 4 years of experience would still make mistakes. And I would have to tell them, pull stuff out of the truck and reload it so there wouldn't be damages when we were loading things out of the warehouse. Another thing is packing materials. They're going to have to pay for the tape, the boxes, the bubble wrap. This is going to cost them a lot of money. If they've never packed a glass item, well, guess what? They need the packing materials for that. Also, once again, if they don't pack the glass items properly, we're going back to the damaged items. They're going to end up with damaged stuff and things like TV. If you've never properly packed a TV, there's a good chance you damage it. And if you don't properly take it apart, also more damages. Yes, you have those prospects that might have their boxes or they save all their boxes, but that's very rare and few between. Additionally, they're going to need these moving blankets. They can rent them. They can buy them with pods or with U-Hauls and wherever they're working with. A lot of them rent and a lot of sell them. However, this is going to cost the prospect more money. They're not seeing this on their front price. So when they send you over that estimate from a pod or they say a container is this much, are they adding in all these additional factors? Are they going to pack this stuff themselves, or are they going to work with a moving company or hire movers? Or maybe they're going to hire guys off Craigslist. And once again, you're going to hire guys off Craigslist. I guarantee you they are going to have damages. You cannot hire somebody off Craigslist for $15 an hour and expect the job to go well if they've never stacked a truck or if they've never stacked a container. This list can go on, and I could keep telling you all these different things that are going to cost them more money and how that ends up leading back to damages. If they hire hire a real professional mover, there is a high probability it will end up saving this prospect money, as there are so many different factors, against that front price that actually play a part. Even something like, let's say, damages on property. If they scratch their floor, and before we continue, if they scratch their floor, do they have liability insurance? Yes, they might have insurance on the property, but let me tell you, good luck going against that. And do they really want to jack their premiums up? No, if they work with the professional mover and something does get damaged in the property that they're moving out of, that's going to be on the professional mover, such as the mover slide some furniture and scratch the floor, or maybe a dolly, something happens with a dolly. Now, if they hired those guys off Craigslist and the Craigslist guy slipped and fell in their house and there's no insurance on that guys with Craigslist, guess what? They're the ones getting that lawsuit, and they're going to be the one that pays. So they have to think about these things before they get involved with the pod service. Now, getting a customer or a pod, to me, it's very similar to Spirit Airlines. And what I mean by that is Spirit Airlines always comes with very, very cheap prices up front, and this is an example that I personally feel. You buy a ticket, it's $250, but when you show up, they hit you for another $80 for the bag. And then all of a sudden your carry-on bag is too big, so they hit you for the carry-on bag as well. Then they're going to hit you for the food, the drinks, and all these little microtransactions. When all said and done, you've just spent $600 because, well, you didn't have enough legroom, or you sat at this seat, so it's more money, or you picked the wrong seat, so you're spending this much money. And every time I've ever flown Spirit in my life, I've ended up spending a lot more money than my ticket, typically double, and I could have just worked with an airline that I prefer to fly and get a better quality service. So it's a very similar, thing. Spirit Airlines, pods, containers, moving company is the whole 9 yards. Now, obviously, not every mover is going to be a good company or a good choice, so they could still have those problems, but there are a lot of good moving companies. I know a lot of good moving companies. You know the good moving companies, so they can hire the right company to get the right service. So let's jump into what to say if a prospect says, I'm just looking for a moving pod. You should respond something like this. Listen, Mr. Prospect, I completely understand the attraction of getting a pod. There are a few things you want to think about before you decide to work with pods. To provide the context, if you work with us, we provide the moving blankets, professionally wrap all of your items, and provide all the labor and equipment for your move. Pods does not give you any of this. You have to do all the work on your own, rent the equipment, and buy the materials and blanket wraps and boxes. The worst part is, if everything is not perfectly stacked on that truck nice and tight, your items are going to shift and rattle around and absorb a significant amount of damage. Without the proper protection, that damage is only going to compound itself. This is going to cost a lot of money, risk, and labor than working directly with the wholesale moving company. With us, we have the proper insurances and all the packing materials to help mitigate risk and make a better client experience. Additionally, pod companies have a weight limit. This means if you go over the weight, they force you to take items out and get a second pod and pay an additional price. When shipping household goods, it's important to have a perfect stack with no loose room. So if your items leave any gap, there's a high probability you will end up with damages. And that's not good. It's not like the trucks driving on a bed of pillows down the highway. We have professional stackers that have been doing this for several years and are all professionally trained to help avoid this type of incident. So how about we spend a few minutes, go through the inventory, and see if we can work out a better deal than pods and eliminate the moving stress that you're currently dealing with. So let me ask you, are you currently at the property that you're going to be moving? You see, at the end, I jumped right for the estimate. I tried to go right into the estimate. I didn't ask them if we could. I just asked them, are you at the property? And I'm circling into the estimate so we can start going over all the different details. You will also notice that I didn't use the word cheaper. This way I'm avoiding that conversation later on. We are offering a better value, a better moving experience. That is what I'm selling. A better value, a better moving experience. I am not selling a cheaper price because we're not going to be cheaper. We're going to be cheaper overall when you stack all the odds against the thing, but not on paper. So we gotta sell the value. Now, if they're still not convinced, you should say something along these lines. Honestly, I can go on and on all day about the risk of working with the container, but let me ask you something about the items that you're going to be transporting. Do they hold any value, sentimental or otherwise? there's a high probability your prospect's going to say yes, of course they do. If they do not, just respond, then why are you shipping them? Why are you moving these items if they don't hold any value and you don't care if they get damaged and you don't care what happens to them? What's the point? You might as well get rid of them instead of spending money to ship broken items. Trap them back into saying, of course, well, there's some stuff I want to get there. I need some things to get there in the right condition. Okay, great. Then you're going to respond this. Then let me ask you this. Is it worth taking a higher risk in getting damages and also working with little to no insurance on your items by using pods? Or would you rather work with a professional moving company that has good insurance options and does all the labor and all the wrapping and protecting of your items? In the end, pods is going to cost you a lot more money and become a much bigger headache. I'm confident that if we do a free moving estimate today, I'm going to be able to work something nice within your moving budget that you have allocated. So, Mr. Prospect, are you currently at the home that you're going to be moving? And you see, once again, you circle them right back and you go for the estimate. Once you start going through the whole process and you get that information, they might be surprised on how affordable a move can be. Even though a move is expensive, pods are still very expensive. And you can continue to build that value in the move when you're speaking to this prospect. Confidence in controlling the conversation is absolutely key. If you practice this objection, you're going to win a lot more deals and get a lot more opportunities because you're going to be closing and bringing in more prospects and getting a lot more estimates from people that originally weren't looking to work with movers. But it is absolutely imperative that when you finish giving the response, you push to go straight into the estimate. Most of the time, it's going to be an opening objection, so that's why you go to the estimate. Now, in the few times it is not an opening objection, maybe you do a follow-up and the prospect tells you, you know what, I think I'm looking to get a pod. You're going to respond in a very similar way. You're going to talk about the disadvantages of getting a container and a pod and the positive things that you get when you work with a moving company. Example, pod, you have to do the loading. Working with a moving company, we do the loading. And the worst part of moving is moving the furniture. Nobody likes doing that. Your friends don't like doing it. Your mother doesn't want to do it. Your father, your sons, your sisters, nobody wants to do it. They don't care how much beer and pizza you're going to give them. Moving sucks. Nobody wants to do it. Don't call me to move your stuff because I'm not going to do it for free because it sucks. There are other disadvantages too, and the list goes on. And another example is boxes. When you buy your own boxes, a lot of prospects work with Home Depot. They work with U-Haul. They get these boxes that are made out of recycled cardboard and they crush down. A lot of professional movers use real cardboard boxes. Do you know the difference between those? A real cardboard box can hold my weight. I'm 185. I can put my weight on that and push down and jump around, and that box isn't going to crush. So you use cheap boxes and a lot of space in those containers, guaranteed to have damages. It's going to happen. That container is going to be on a truck and it's going to be bouncing around, or on a train, it's going to be bouncing around, and it needs to be stacked proper. Look, if you guys found this video helpful, make sure you hit that like button, you subscribe to the channel, and if you guys have other objections you want to learn, make sure you put a comment in down in the comment section and tell me what you guys want to learn about. Thanks, guys.